Hello, my name is Janice B. Gordon. This is Scale Your Sales podcast. Welcome to the Scale Your Sales podcast, listed number 9 of 42 best podcasts for every sales professional in 2021. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert, recommended by LinkedIn as one of 15 innovative sales influencers to follow in 2021. In this episode of Scale Your Sales podcast, my guest talked about the context of content and how important it is to deliver the right content at the right point when your buyers really need it, depending on what stage of the process they are. So often, I think the stat is 70% of content is not used, but it's not used because it's not good. It's not used because it's not given at the right point. So HighSpot is one of those companies that really focuses on making sure content delivers, not only through the metrics, but also through the training as well. This just-in-time training, moving your sales team, your sales people with the information they need at the right points. My next guest is VP of Product and Customer Marketing at HighSpot. He has a passion for connecting people to resources and solving tough problems. Welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast, Gerard Green.
Thank you, Janice. How are you today?
Yeah, hot. It's 90 degrees here. I'm hot. But, I've been looking forward to speaking to you. So I wanted to start off by talking about a HighSpot and what they do for their customers and the kind of the great things around making sure that the content is really working for them. And that's the core to lots of people's businesses, because I think I read a stat that 70% of content is unused, which is, what's the point in creating it if it's not used, if it's missing the point? So tell me more about, what's uniquely different about what you do for your customers at HighSpot.
Yeah, absolutely. So to take a step back for a minute, so HighSpot's a sales enablement platform. We believe that sales enablement is the discipline that gets all of the content, all of the sales training, all of the sales coaching, all the things that marketing and sales and enablement teams do to make sales successful together in one place. And when you think about why content isn't used, you have to remember most of the time it's not because a salesperson doesn't like the content or can't find the content. Usually they don't know how to use it or when to use it and in what situations to use it in. And I think marketers, we got to recognize that not all of our content is phenomenal. Yeah. I think we have a point of view that everything we write is gold. And I think most of what we write is good in a specific context. So for top of funnel or for mid funnel or for bottom of funnel, there's a piece of content that serves a very specific purpose, but we have to give our sales teams guidance on when and how to use that content. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about what HighSpot does, we'll centralize all of your content. You'll have a single source of truth for where all your stuff is, make it easy to find, tags, and guidance, it's fine. It's the context that I think really matters. When do I use this? How do I use this? What does good look like when I use this? What will happen when I use this correctly? And then what are all the great analytics and insights I'm going to get about what pieces of content are driving conversion? And then that's when you can flip the whole conversation to say, Janice, it's not that you're not using the content, it's that you're using the wrong content at the wrong time. And you're not having the right success levels. And so, yeah, of course, you're not going to ever use this piece of content again. But if we've put together the right content for the right time, for the right buyers, in the right scenarios, then the likelihood that you're successful goes up, and then we all win. So I think in a nutshell, you want to think about HighSpot not just as a content repository. This is your content. This is your sales training. You can find a similar statistic that says about 87% of training is forgotten if it's not applied in 30 days. So I'm sure you've spoken to many kind of sales practitioners and sales training practitioners who are beating the same drum about building phenomenal world-class training and onboarding programs, but the training's forgotten. So again, getting a lot of things in context, we at HighSpot believe is the way to get more consumption from the sales team and therefore more conversion and better alignment to the business outcomes we're all trying to drive.
So explain to me, how does the training fit into all of this? Because I read, on your site that, that's a key aspect, but I don't understand how that all kind of locks in.
Sure. Yeah. When you think about kind of traditional formal training, lessons and courses and certifications, those are typically set in kind of corporate learning management systems. There's a category of sales training tools that allow you to do the video training and set up courses and set up lessons. Again, the challenge has always been context. I've never met a seller that says, I love training. I can't wait to take this training class, right?
So they do when they're doing my class. Thank you very much.
That's the only exception. I forgot about that one. But I fundamentally believe that training is also contextual. You take the training when you need to train. You need to learn about that product before the sales call you have to present on that product. And most of the time, the formal training you need has been, it can be a little stale. We always use an analogy of, if you're going to paint a fence, you're not going to read a book on how to paint a fence. You're typically going to go to YouTube and go, search for how to paint a fence, and you're going to try to find the shortest but most impactful video you can find. And you're going to watch that video in 2x speed, and then you're going to go out and you're going to try to do what you saw in the video. And I think we see a lot of that in the sales training realm, particularly as like the sales force demographics have changed. More millennials are now entering the workforce, and the way they learn is kind of that just in time, just enough. How do you serve that need in context? And when you think about putting it in the kind of the HighSpot system, of course, there's courses and there's lessons and there's the learning paths and the certifications that the traditional kind of LMS tools have. But 70% of learning is done with the actual application of the work. And so how do we, again, get that learning, get that training, get that just-in-time nugget to you in a way that it meets you exactly where you are, right? If I'm meeting with a customer tomorrow about one of the new products in the portfolio that's in industry X that is a cross-sell opportunity, wouldn't it be great if we could just send you this micro learning of what to do on that call tomorrow? And what if that micro learning included background on the product, background on the industry, background on the account, and then also just best practices on how to have a great second meeting. So it's not about this massive repository of learning that you want your seller to sort through and have them find. It's about the learning, finding the seller at the moment that they need it in. So again, that context, that analytics, that AI all coming together to meet a seller where they are, to make it feel like this completely immersive thing, as opposed to this wildly complex system that they have to sort through on a day-to-day.
It's interesting because you want your sellers to meet the buyers where they are. And often you don't meet the sellers where they are. I mean, the whole sales system isn't really geared up for that. And it's crazy. The sales system is not geared up for that. This is why we've got the expanding sales ops. We've got the expanding sales enablement. We've got the expanding sales stack. There's so many levels of complication that we're putting into the sales process that I wonder how much we are actually meeting salespeople where they're at, rather than layering on more and more complication. I don't know if you have a view about that.
No, 100%. I mean, we look at kind of this notion of more and more and more. We talk about that a lot, is in response to changing economic pressures that we're all feeling right now, in response to changing buyer dynamics, in response to product complexity, the natural reaction from marketing and from sales leadership and from enablement is to say, well, here's more things, right? Here's more content, more training, more tools, more dashboards, more insights. We just tend to just say, here, like we got you. And again, if you're a seller on the other end of that, it's so overwhelming, because putting it all together can be downright impossible. How does this all fit? You give me a new tool, I need to be trained on that tool. You give me a new dashboard, I need to know how to read this thing. You give me a new piece of content, I need to know where it fits in the system. And you get this information overload, and sellers check out. They're human beings. There's cognitive overload, and they just say, you know what, I'm done. I'm just going to default to what has gotten me to club the last 3 years, and I'm going to be just fine. And typically you'll have that bell curve of performance, and your top performers are going to do what top performers do. Your middle sellers can go either way. Your bottom sellers are going to churn. And we've just kind of accepted that. We've just kind of accepted that, the majority of our quota attainment is going to come from our top performers. And that's just the way it is. And we hope we can pull some of the middle of the pack forward. We hope we can manage them up instead of managing them out. And we've just assigned a model. Literally, you've seen these sales capacity models of we predict 20, 25%, 30% churn. And that's why we have to hire more. And it's crazy. It really is crazy. And so I think one of the principles that I've learned to appreciate about the way we even think about enablement internally at HighSpot is this notion of enablement with empathy, putting the seller at the forefront of everything we do and start to think about wearing their shoes for just a minute and thinking about if you land a program, if you land an initiative, if you land a new tool, if you do not start with the what's in it for me as a seller, it does not get launched. If we can't communicate that to our sales team, we can't launch it. We will delay a launch. We will push something back. We will hold. We have to nail that WIFI. Otherwise, we will lose them. And I think more organizations are starting to recognize, particularly in the wake of the disruption caused by the pandemic, your cheat code, your ability to hire and retain talent is everything. And so being empathetic isn't, a play you run. It's got to be part of your culture. So I feel it too, Janice, that notion of like just overwhelming a seller, those days, I think have to be over for companies that want to be able to drive faster change with more meaningful impact.
I think that the requirements of the salesperson, what they need to do in the job has changed. The problem is that the job spec hasn't changed. And the problem is that the sales managers have been in the industry for a while. So they haven't changed really. Sales leaders, people need to have business acumen. They need to be able to have different conversations to be trusted advisors. You have all of the tools that give you that just-in-time information. So you don't need to have 20-year history on this product anymore. Right. That's not necessary. So the job has changed, but the job spec hasn't changed, and many of the managers haven't changed. I don't know if you've got a view on that how you can enable that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, a learning that I've had in the last couple of years is also that enablement only goes as far as manager enablement. And we've kind of forgot about the managers in that process. So when you think about the sales enablement activities, we at HighSpot think about in the world, yes, you need to equip your reps with content. That's important. They need to go out and engage buyers with that content. Yes, that's important. They need the training, but they also need to be coached. And who enables the coaches? Who sits down with the sales managers and says, here's how we're going to launch this new product. Here's how we're going to take out this competitor. And how do you do it in a way that is kind of consistent and systemic throughout the org? Because you've seen this as well. Sales rep rises to sales manager. Sales manager basically says, do the things that I did when I was a rep. And I'm going to have my team embody a lot of the things that I believe is core principles. And we are going to crush our quota as a team, right? And so you create another team of top performers, but that's different from the team right next to it. That's different from the Northeast region team. That's different from the strategic team. That's different from the commercial team. So everybody's got a different set of plays that they're not wrong to run, but where's the oversight of the connective tissue of market insights, competitive insights, product specs, learnings on a demo? Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that we need to be consistent about for the sales management level, because also think about it, when we launch a new initiative to the field in mass, the field typically has a question. Who's the first person they ask? It's not the sales enablement. It's not the sales trainer. It's not the product marketer. It's their manager. Janice, how does this fit? How does this work? Janice, this is incongruent with what you told me 2 months ago. I thought we weren't selling the product anymore. And so getting managers on the same page, coaching, giving them the content first, the plays, the WIFI, the big picture, getting their buy-in around the thing, we believe is essential to good enablement, because without it, you're now running sales plays in the silos and the business outcomes become inconsistent. You're right back to, why is only Fred's team crushing it? What's Fred's team doing that Bob and Janice's and Jeff's team aren't? And now that inspection of what's different will probably come back to, have those managers been enabled and enrolled on the thinking around the initiative at the same level? And worse, are they bought in? do they believe it? Because you don't want the CRO or the head of sales having the crackheads. That if that's happened, something's gone awry. If we can get alignment through and through, which I know sounds like nirvana, But we can get at least alignment around why we're driving this and what the business outcomes are, what the specific behaviors and skill changes and knowledge the reps need to have, and making sure that enablement and marketing can be aligned on delivering those, we can now make it a lot easier for a seller to get it. Going back to the empathy point we talked about a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I certainly meet many sales leaders that understand the business goal and objective. But when you go down a level to the sales manager, they have no idea. They have no idea at all. And then, forget it, at sales rep level, it's all about the quota. Don't talk to me about anything else. You don't need to know that. Just focus on your quota. And I think you're right. There's got to be an alignment throughout the entire organization, and, to make sure that everyone's on the same page and aiming for the same goal. There's a few things that I wanted your view on, because I don't know at HighSpot whether they have an awareness of this. I really want to get your view. I have a passion and a campaign around changing the language we use in sales. Things like hunter, target, lead, close. I mean, it's not only disrespectful to our most valued customers, it's very disrespectful to us as people within sales to be thinking in that way. No one's on safari going out killing lions. It's no longer about us and them, us, buyers and sellers. We're on the same team. We should be aiming for the same goals. If our customers win and you talked about a clear focus of what's in it for me, unless we're clear about what the outcome is for our customer, we shouldn't be doing it. So we should be on the same team, but the language that we use in sales doesn't enable that. So, and I've seen a lot of programs that continue to reinforce that kind of language: close, hunter, leads. This is why I really want to float it by your boat.
No, I love it. And as you said it, I thought through some of the terms we use. I lead a product marketing team. One of our kind of pillars is on compete and intelligence. And I remember we authored, we call them daggers, competitive daggers. Like, you pull out these knives to go poke your competitors. And that's super aggressive and violent. So I caught it when you said it. I will join you in that campaign, Janice. I think, like, being conscious of the words we use, being conscious of the mental state and the attitudes and how we reinforce those through our communications is something I think we should all be aware of. And I also think, yes, this notion of being on the same page, there's also buyer empathy that I think we lose sometimes. And this respect, like you said, this respect for the buyer to understand that they're not out to be hunted. They're not out to be sought. They're not out to be gathered or sold to. And it's not as aggressive, but a word that I also don't love. I don't love the concept of pitch. I don't love the concept of, hey, here's the pitch deck, because it assumes that I'm going to show up on a call. I'm going to pitch you on an idea. And in 20 or 25 minutes, if you're sold on an idea, we're going to have another meeting. And so I've tried to incorporate the concept of a teach deck, because, again, I don't think people want to be pitched to. I think people want to learn. And I think the notion of the buyer-seller dynamic is to get your sellers to be more of a trusted advisor, an information collector and an information provider, and almost this information contextualizer. Because let's put ourselves in the shoes of the buyer for a minute. How much information sources do they have to make a purchase decision now? Between what's on the internet, between Gartner, Forrester, G2, friends, families. I mean, there's just so much out there for them to make sense of. And how many times have you seen the best sales person wins when they can make all that information make sense? And that's just a much more positive experience than, well, let me just pitch you my version of it and see if I can compel you to do more things. We've seen that behavior get tuned out, specifically more so in the wake of virtual selling, when I'm not in the room with you. I cannot compel you with my energy and my aura. I'm just another meeting on a Zoom, and you're multitasking. You're looking at another thing you got to get ready for. And if this thing doesn't end in 5 minutes, we're all going to hop off. It's not as rude as leaving the room, but we got to go at the top of the hour. So, get through your pitch, send it to me when I'm done. We'll get back to you. So I will join you in the being more conscious of our language campaign. You have converted a new follower.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. All right, I want to talk to you about diversity in sales. Now, we're both black people here, and I'm sure you often go in the room and you're the only, and it may have changed, it may not have. So I'd really like your view. There's a lot of talk around encouraging more diversity into sales. The numbers haven't really moved significantly, but I wonder, is it something that you're conscious of? Are there certain experiences you'd like not to have again? What do you think we should be doing as an industry?
I think the first thing I think about is just there's always historical context we need to be aware of. These challenges have been around a long time. 2020 felt like this great awakening, but for folks like you and me, it was just another year. And so it's great. It's great that there's a collective set of awareness that, hey, we need to do things differently. And as a company, we need to do things differently. We need to recruit, we need to attract. We didn't run into these problems overnight, and we're not going to solve them overnight. And I think the biggest thing that I would ask companies to do is don't just look at how many are in the pipeline. Don't just kind of think about diversifying the pipeline. Start with your current employees. Look at the experiences that they have had and get an understanding of, are those experiences great? If you cannot, if your minority employees are not having great experiences, the likelihood that you will attract more minorities is very low. All right. So whether or not there's an official green book in tech about what companies to work for, it exists. Before I joined the company, I reached out to the brown folks and black folks and said, hey, what's it really like to work here? And they will tell you. They will be unabashed in that pursuit. And I think, again, going back to historical context, is so much of what we have not had are the same opportunities. And so creating more of those, creating more safe spaces for us to flourish in sales, to flourish in marketing, to flourish in product organizations is the floodgate I think we open up now, is to create those opportunities. And those opportunities should create more. But I just want to be conscious this wasn't an overnight problem, and it won't be an overnight solution. And I'd encourage and ask more hiring managers, more sales leaders, more marketing leaders to, again, recognize those hidden biases you have and recognize that a lot of this is about opportunities. People don't have the skill sets that you think they should have at a certain point in their career because they didn't get the same opportunities as other people got. But put in the right position, going back to context, these people would absolutely flourish in your organization. So, it's a mixed bag of how do we make up for lost time? How do we create more opportunities? And then how do we, again, make sure that the folks who are in the org now having these experiences are being treated well? Because if they're not, they're going to leave and you're right back to where you started.
Yeah. And, I think that I thought of it's not only the people in the organization if they're being treated well, but then the other people within the organization really checking their own biases that are already in the organization, because they may be treated well in their team, but when they go out to the wider context of the organization, then they're not quite so comfortable. And it's sometimes that people just have lived a narrow life. And they just don't have the experience of the other. They make assumptions. Our education continues to amplify the one view of the world. Yeah. So if you're educated in that way, then you don't think of what the alternative view of the world might be, that you've got no experience of it. So I think there's a job for organizations to do for everyone else within the organization as well. They need to be aware of their own biases and things. Yeah, and I agree with you. We've got a long way to go. And that's why it's a subject I constantly platform on Scale Your Sales, because I think it's important that we need to find a way through. So that's my other campaign.
No, amen. And again, I believe there is a broader enablement job to be done by human resources organizations, by boards, by executive leadership teams. There's a broader job to be done on what that looks like. And so again, can recognize, I think, better effort to be better at diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging. I see it I see it commercialized across the board. I see it everywhere. But the actual execution of it is going to take some time. I mean, this is a decade like approach to it. The folks that you're bringing in that may not have gotten opportunities in the past will be the next generation leaders you have, who will give marginalized folks opportunities that they didn't get. And it's just a long tail that's coming. But I want us to kind of recognize that, like, just because there's more brown faces on the exec team, just because we put the flag up for Pride Month, just because we give Juneteenth off as a holiday, doesn't mean we've solved what could be, at least in America, a 400-year challenge. It's going to take a while.
Yeah.
It's going to take a while, but
yeah. And it's not England is in the same position. It's not just America. It may be packaged slightly differently, but actually, if you look at the boards and you look at the figures are exactly the same. So we have the same issue. Okay, so let me ask you, who is your hero or shiro?
My hero, Shiro. So my mother is my shiro. My mother was a librarian, and my mother worked for the city. And part of what I've always appreciated about my mother is that she could see around corners, because I literally think working in a library, it is literally like you are surrounded by resources. You're surrounded by knowledge. You're surrounded by insights. And like, this is like for the millennials listening, like physical hard copy books. Like you're surrounded by, so this is like old school internet, right? But like you're surrounded by all these resources. And if you want to learn something, you just need to pick a book and open it up. And I think the library was also this place where other folks could just be without having to pay to be. So different schools would come in, different programs would come in, different activities would be a part of it. And I think by virtue of just seeing it and sensing it, she always put me in a position to take advantage of those resources. She always had a way to say, oh, you're doing this camp this summer, I'm gonna put my son in it. Or you're doing this type of school and this kind of alternative way of learning, I think my son would be interested in that. And so she's set the foundation and the course for me to recognize that, there's a whole bunch of resources out in this world, and so much of it just requires the translation of how someone else can take advantage of it. And, I'm giving you the non-typical answer for all the reasons I love my mother. I love my mother because she gave me life. I love my mother because she instilled confidence. I love my mother because she provided so much. But I think that's the thing that she instilled in me that I kind of want to carry forward and continue to do, is make sure people have access to resources that wouldn't have otherwise gotten that, because it'll unlock so much potential in human beings that I think we even scare ourselves sometimes. So my mother's a shiro for a variety of reasons, but that program she instilled in me is one I keep to this day, and still in my kids and my teams and everyone around me.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful that you're carrying that through. So it's fantastic. All right. So how can listeners get hold of you?
Oh man, I am an open book. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and so that's one of the channels. I used to be better at Twitter, but I just a couple of years ago just stopped. So LinkedIn's super easy. You can always drop me an email. I'm very responsive. It's just gerard.green@highspot.com, or my personal if you want, gerard.green@gmail.com. But those are the three channels that are easiest to reach me in, and I'll look forward to having any type of conversation anybody wants to have.
Well, I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast, Gerard Green.
Thank you, Janice. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast. If you like this discussion, feel free to listen to other episodes or watch the captioned show on YouTube and subscribe to future episodes. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you.